1 scent. 3 howls. An impossible destiny. When the most powerful werewolf rulers in existence converge on her small town, their eyes burn with the same truth. She bears the mark of the triple moon, making her the fated mate to all 3 alphas. But ancient law demands she choose only one. The northern warrior who awakens her strength. The eastern mystic who touches her soul. The western rebel who sets her heart on fire. Each bond grows stronger. Each alpha fights to claim her, and the clock is ticking. Because if she doesn't choose before the new moon, the mate bonds will shatter, killing all 3 alphas and plunging the werewolf world into darkness. Unless she attempts the forbidden ritual that no one has survived in 1,000 years. 3 alphas, 1 woman, 0 choices. Can she break the laws of fate? Or will her love destroy them all? The nightmare clung to her like wet silk, each breath ragged and desperate. Her feet pounded against moss-covered ground, ancient trees blurring into shadowy sentinels around her. Behind her, 3 massive wolves pursued, not just hunting, but stalking with an intelligence that felt almost calculated. The wolf with golden eyes led the chase, its movements fluid and predatory. Beside it, a silver-eyed wolf moved with military precision, each step deliberate. The third, with eyes burning crimson like heated metal, radiated pure, raw power that made her inner core tremble. She woke with a strangled gasp, sweat pooling at the base of her spine. Moonlight filtered through cheap apartment blinds, casting striped shadows across her bedroom. Her hand instinctively reached for the headboard and froze. Deep claw marks scored the wooden surface, fresh and jagged. Parallel lines of splintered wood emerged from nowhere, as if something with massive, razor-sharp claws had gripped the headboard while she slept. "No," she whispered, tracing the marks. They were too precise, too deliberate to be a dream's residual imagination. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, a 26-year-old who worked at Evergreen Books, a small independent bookstore nestled in the mountain town of Silver Ridge. She'd lived here her entire life, knowing every street corner, every local legend. And these marks didn't belong in her carefully ordered world. The clock read 5:47 a.m. Too early to call anyone, too late to fall back asleep. She dressed mechanically, worn jeans, a soft gray sweater, comfortable boots perfect for shelving books and navigating the store's narrow aisles. Something felt different. Not just from the nightmare, but within herself. Her senses seemed sharper. The distant chirping of morning birds sounded almost painfully loud. When she brushed past her houseplants, she could smell not just their green leaves, but the rich soil underneath, the microscopic organisms living within. At the bookstore, strange things continued. The neighborhood dogs, normally friendly and curious, whimpered when she walked past. A German shepherd tucked its tail and backed away, its eyes wide with an emotion closer to fear than aggression. "Morning, Elena," called Mr. Henderson, walking his golden retriever. But even his typically jovial dog kept its distance, watching her with unblinking intensity. Inside the bookstore, the morning passed in a blur of routine, organizing shelves, restocking new releases, helping the occasional early customer. But underneath the normalcy, something thrummed, a current of electricity, of anticipation. Mid-morning, while reorganizing the folklore section, an impossible scent caught her attention. Pine forests, deep, ancient, untouched by human hands. Thunderstorms, with their metallic promise of rain and power. Yet outside, the sky remained cloudless and bright, a perfect autumn day in the mountains. Her fingers traced the spine of an old book about local Native American legends. Something tugged at her memory. A half-forgotten story about shapeshifters, about wolves that walked like men. "Just stress," she muttered. "Just a weird dream." But deep down, Elena knew something fundamental was changing. And these claw marks, these impossible scents, the dog's strange behavior, they were just the beginning. The town of Silver Ridge rarely saw excitement, but tonight was different. Whispers circulated through the bookstore all day. Foreign dignitaries, a high-profile summit, the exclusive Moonstone Lodge preparing for something extraordinary. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she counted the day's receipts, her ears catching fragments of conversation from the last few customers. Something about international representatives, a critical meeting that would somehow impact the region's future. As twilight descended, she began her closing routine. Soft amber light from vintage lamps cast long shadows across wooden shelves. The folklore and mythology sections seemed to watch her. Ancient tomes about wolf legends and shapeshifter myths suddenly feeling more substantial than mere stories. Mr. Peterson, the store's owner, had already left, trusting Elena to lock up as usual. The bell above the door chimed softly as she flipped the open sign to closed. Through the large front window, she first spotted them. Black SUVs with tinted windows, moving with military-like precision. Their approach was synchronized, almost choreographed. Each vehicle gleamed under the streetlights, expensive and imposing. Something inside Elena shifted, a sensation unlike anything she'd experienced before, a magnetic pull that made her breath catch. Her body tensed, muscles coiling with an energy that felt both foreign and impossibly familiar. The motorcades moved slowly down Silver Ridge's main street. People stopped and stared. Children were quickly ushered inside by parents. Local business owners paused their evening routines, watching with a mix of curiosity and something else. Tension. Anticipation. Elena's hand pressed against the bookstore window. Her reflection showed wide eyes, skin pale with an inexplicable excitement. The wolves from her nightmare flickered in her peripheral vision. Golden, silver, crimson. As the last SUV passed, she felt it. A compulsion. A need so profound it overrode rational thought. Night fell quickly. Her apartment felt suffocating. Sheets tangled around her legs as she tossed, restless. Every sound, a distant dog's bark, the whisper of wind through pine trees, seemed amplified. Then, without conscious decision, she was moving, bare feet padding across cold wooden floors. Her body moved with a purpose her mind didn't comprehend. The town square waited, bathed in moonlight. 3 motorcades converged simultaneously, their movements too precise to be coincidental. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. 3 men emerged. Each was extraordinary, powerful, dangerous. The first, tall, with shoulders like a warrior, golden hair catching moonlight, moved with predatory grace. His eyes, when they locked onto Elena, glowed a molten gold that matched her nightmare perfectly. Beside him, a man with silver-streaked dark hair stepped forward. Military precision defined his movements. His eyes, a piercing silver that seemed to cut through darkness, found her instantly. The third man radiated a different energy. Raw power. Barely contained violence. Crimson highlights in his midnight black hair matched the burning red of his eyes. All 3 turned, stared, directly at her. And in that moment, Elena knew her world would never be the same. The 3 men moved with impossible speed. What should have been a slow, deliberate approach became a blur of motion that defied human physics. Elena's heart thundered, her muscles locked in place. Part terror, part inexplicable anticipation. Marcus took the lead, his movements precise and predatory. His partially military-styled black coat rippled with each step, muscles coiled beneath an immaculate dark shirt. Silver streaked through his dark hair caught the moonlight, making him look like a warrior from some ancient legend. Sebastian flanked his right, moving with a fluid grace that suggested more than mere athletic skill. Where Marcus radiated controlled aggression, Sebastian moved like wind itself. Purposeful, yet somehow ethereal. His eyes, a piercing silvery green, scanned the environment with a depth that suggested he was reading more than just the physical landscape. Damien completed their triangle, wild and unpredictable. His leather jacket was worn, his movements less disciplined but no less dangerous. Where the other two moved with calculated precision, Damien moved like a storm about to break, raw, uncontained energy barely restrained. The townspeople around them seemed to fade into background. Some instinctively stepped back, a primal warning flooding their systems. Dogs began to whine, tucking tails and backing away. The air itself felt charged, electric with supernatural tension. Elena's breath caught. The three men moved with such synchronized purpose that it felt choreographed. Except this was no performance. This was something deeper. Primitive. A connection that transcended ordinary understanding. Mine, Marcus growled first. The word emerged part human speech, part wolf's territorial claim. His form began to shift, not fully wolf, but a terrifying in-between state where human musculature hardened and elongated, hands becoming something razor-sharp and dangerous. Mine, Sebastian echoed, softer but no less intense. A sudden breeze kicked up around him, carrying the scent of pine forests and distant thunderstorms. Lightning seemed to crackle at his fingertips, not from the sky, but generated by some internal supernatural power. Mine! Damien roared, and the sound was pure primal challenge. His eyes burned with crimson fire, something wild and untamable erupting from deep within. Where the others maintained some semblance of control, Damien was raw, unfiltered emotion made manifest. They began to circle Elena, each movement a calculated display of dominance. Marcus's partial wolf form bristled with military precision. Sebastian's connection to nature manifested as swirling winds that seemed to respond to his emotional state. Damien radiated pure, unbridled energy, a force of nature barely contained in human form. Nearby townspeople stumbled backward. A woman dropped her shopping bags. A car alarm inexplicably began to wail. The supernatural tension was no longer something subtle. It was a tangible force that pressed against reality's boundaries. The three alphas continued their lethal dance, each demanding the others stand down, each claiming a bond that defied explanation. The tension in the town square crackled like live electricity. Marcus, Sebastian, and Damien stood locked in a supernatural standoff, their primal instincts battling for dominance. Elena remained at the center, her heart racing, caught between three powerful forces that seemed ready to tear each other, and the entire town, apart. A sudden hush fell over the crowd. The elderly woman who stepped forward moved with unexpected grace. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a simple navy blue cardigan that seemed incongruous with the supernatural drama unfolding around her. Yet when she moved, even the alphas paused. "Enough," she said. The single word carried weight beyond its simple syllable. The Oracle of the Pacific Pack, a title that meant something profound to the supernatural world but meant nothing to the terrified townspeople, fixed her piercing gaze on the three alphas. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept across the scene. Elena felt something shift in the air. It was as if an invisible hand had pressed pause on the supernatural confrontation. "You will not claim her here," the Oracle declared. Her voice was soft, yet commanding, carrying the weight of ancient laws and unbreakable traditions. Marcus, still partially shifted, his wolf form rippling with barely contained rage, turned slightly. Sebastian's wind-like energy seemed to pause. Damien's crimson fire dimmed, but did not extinguish. The oracle's gaze landed on Elena. "Child," she said, "you bear the mark that has been prophesied for generations." Elena looked confused. She hadn't noticed anything different about herself. But the oracle continued. "The triple moon mark, visible only to those with the sight." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out an intricate wooden medallion. As she held it, subtle patterns began to glow around Elena, soft moonlight silver lines that seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm. The townspeople saw nothing, but the alphas and the oracle saw everything. 3 distinct marks emerged, overlapping in a complex pattern that suggested unity and conflict. A silver crescent representing the northern mountains, a green-tinged mark representing the eastern forests, a crimson design representing the western valleys. "By the ancient pack laws," the oracle continued, her voice carrying a legal precision that suggested she was more than just an elderly woman. "The mate must be given time. She must understand her destiny. She must choose freely." The alphas tensed. Marcus's military discipline warred with his primal instincts. Sebastian's connection to natural law fought against his desire to claim. Damien's wild energy struggled against an ancient tradition that demanded patience. Any attempt to force a claim, the oracle's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, will result in me calling the Continental Pack Council. The threat hung in the air. Every supernatural being present understood the gravity of such an invocation. The Continental Pack Council was not a body to be challenged lightly. Their judgments were swift, their punishments legendary. Elena stood at the center of this storm, completely overwhelmed. She had no idea what was happening, why these powerful beings were focused on her, or what this meant for her life. The oracle turned to her. "You will be protected," she said simply, "and you will be given time to understand." The 3 alphas, Marcus, Sebastian, and Damien, remained locked in a tense standoff. But something had changed. The immediate threat of violence had been replaced by a different kind of tension. A waiting tension. A tension of destiny. Elena awakened slowly, her head throbbing with a dull ache. Soft, dove-gray linens surrounded her, and the room felt impossibly large. Crystal chandeliers hanging from cathedral-like ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing misty mountain landscapes. Nothing about this space resembled her tiny bookshop apartment. Moonstone Lodge. The name echoed in her mind from last night's chaotic events. She sat up, taking in her surroundings. The suite was a masterpiece of understated luxury. Pale woods, silvery fabrics, minimalist furniture that suggested immense wealth without being ostentatious. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the room, its frame carved with intricate wolf-like designs she was certain hadn't been there moments ago. A soft knock interrupted her bewilderment. Marcus entered, his presence filling the room immediately. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his muscular frame, moving with a military precision that suggested years of disciplined training. His steel-gray eyes swept the room before settling on her, a protective gesture so natural it seemed unconscious. "You're awake," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Up close, Marcus was even more imposing. Broad shoulders, sharp jawline, skin that looked like it had been carved from mountain granite. Yet there was something beneath the warrior's exterior. A softness in his eyes that suggested depth beyond mere physicality. "Where am I?" Elena's voice sounded smaller than she intended. "Moonstone Lodge. Neutral territory for supernatural negotiations." Marcus pulled a chair closer, sitting with a controlled movement that suggested he could spring into action at any moment. "You're safe. Protected." He began explaining werewolf society, layers of pack hierarchy, the sacred nature of mate bonds, the delicate political balance between territorial packs. His voice was deep, educational, stripped of unnecessary emotion. Elena found herself fascinated, her bookish nature emerging as she absorbed every detail. "So, there are rules," she interrupted at one point. "Complex social structures that govern everything?" A hint of a smile crossed Marcus's face. "Precisely. Nothing is left to chance in our world." He explained how pack leadership passed through bloodlines, how territories were negotiated, how supernatural laws predated human legal systems by thousands of years. Elena listened, her natural curiosity overriding her earlier fear. "And me?" she asked. "Where do I fit in all of this?" Marcus's expression shifted. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something darker. A warrior's mask of controlled emotion. "The triple moon mate is extraordinarily rare," he said carefully. "In our entire recorded history, there have been perhaps 3 documented cases." Elena leaned forward, sensing the weight behind his words. "But there's a cost," Marcus continued, his voice dropping. "A ritual must be performed to awaken your wolf, your supernatural potential. But this ritual comes with an impossible choice." The room seemed to grow colder. Marcus's eyes, once warm with explanation, now held a haunted quality. "When you awaken your wolf," he said slowly, "you must choose. One alpha will become your permanent mate. The other 2... He paused, the words seemingly difficult to articulate. "They will be severed from the bond. Permanently." Elena felt her breath catch. "Severed how?" she whispered. Marcus's response was clinical, brutal in its directness. "They will slowly fade. Madness first. Then a systematic shutdown of their supernatural abilities. Eventually, death." The weight of the revelation hung between them. A terrible, impossible choice. 1 mate would live, 2 would die. And the decision rested entirely with her. The 2 days following Marcus's revelation passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. Elena found herself sequestered in the luxurious suite, her mind racing with the impossible choice she would eventually need to make. The werewolf world felt both alien and strangely familiar, like a half-remembered dream just beyond her grasp. On the morning of the 2nd day, Sebastian arrived at her suite. Unlike Marcus's military precision, he moved with a fluid, almost meditative grace. Where Marcus wore crisp suits that spoke of discipline, Sebastian dressed in soft earth tones, a moss-green sweater and dark trousers that seemed to blend with the natural world around him. "Would you like to see something?" he asked, his voice soft and melodic. There was no demand in his tone, only an invitation. Elena found herself nodding, grateful for any escape from the suffocating thoughts that had consumed her. The greenhouse was a marvel of glass and living green. Sunlight filtered through massive windows, creating a cathedral-like space where plants from around the world thrived in carefully curated ecosystems. Sebastian moved through the space like he was part of the environment, touching leaves, adjusting a vine here, straightening a delicate orchid there. "In nature," he began, selecting a small trowel and a packet of seeds, "everything is connected. Packs are like ecosystems. Each member plays a crucial role, supporting the whole." He knelt down beside a prepared patch of rich, dark soil. "Moonflowers are particularly interesting," Sebastian explained, opening the seed packet. "They only bloom in the presence of supernatural energy. Most humans would see nothing but dormant seeds. But for our kind, they're a living connection to the moon's magic." Elena watched, fascinated as he demonstrated how to plant the tiny seeds. His fingers moved with a gentleness that surprised her, each seed placed with careful consideration, a whisper of respect for the potential life within. "Would you like to try?" he asked, holding out another seed. When her fingers brushed the seed, something unexpected happened. The soil seemed to pulse with a soft, silvery light. Sebastian's breath caught in his throat. "Remarkable," he murmured. As they worked together, Sebastian spoke of pack dynamics, not as rules to be followed, but as a complex web of relationships. He explained how werewolf bonds went beyond simple hierarchy, describing them as living, breathing connections that required care, understanding, and mutual respect. "It's like this garden," he said, gesturing around them. "Each plant supports the others. Some provide shade, some draw nutrients, some attract pollinators. No single plant is more important than the whole." Elena found herself relaxing. Where Marcus had approached her with military precision, Sebastian offered understanding. His presence was calming, like standing in the center of a forest, surrounded by ancient protective trees. When she carefully pressed another seed into the soil, something extraordinary happened. The moonflower seeds began to sprout immediately, delicate silver-white tendrils pushing through the dark earth. They grew not with the slow progression of normal plants, but with a supernatural speed that defied natural law. Sebastian's eyes widened. Tears gathered at the corners, a complex emotion dancing across his face, wonder mixed with a deep, profound sorrow. "Your transformation has already begun," he whispered. The moonflowers continued to grow, their ethereal white petals unfurling in response to Elena's proximity, creating a silent, luminous testament to the supernatural changes brewing within her. The evening air hummed with electric anticipation when Damien appeared at Elena's suite. Where Marcus had been formal and Sebastian contemplative, Damien radiated pure, unbridled energy. He wore a leather jacket that looked like it had seen 1,000 adventures, dark jeans and boots that suggested he was more at home on wild terrain than in polished corridors. "We're getting out of here," he announced, not as a question, but a declaration. His eyes sparkled with a dangerous mixture of mischief and challenge. Before Elena could protest, he tossed her a leather jacket, clearly his, far too large for her frame, but somehow perfect. "Put this on. You'll want the protection." The motorcycle waiting outside was a beast of machine and muscle, a custom black and silver monster that looked more like a predator than a vehicle. Damien didn't offer her a helmet, instead securing her behind him with a firm grip that was both protective and provocative. "Hold tight," he warned, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her entire body. When the engine roared to life, Elena realized this was nothing like any ride she'd experienced. Damien didn't just drive. He attacked the mountain roads, leaning into impossible curves, the motorcycle an extension of his wild spirit. The world blurred around them, pine forests and moonlit peaks becoming liquid streaks of darkness and silver. She should have been terrified. Instead, something inside her awakened. Her initial death grip on his leather jacket transformed. Her body moved with him, understanding the rhythm of the ride, the dance between machine, rider, and road. Wind whipped her hair, and for the first time since her world had been turned upside down, she felt something close to pure joy. A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her. Startling, unexpected, wild. Damien's shoulders shook with his own laughter, a sound of pure, infectious freedom. They rode for what seemed like hours, climbing higher into the mountain ranges. The moon tracked their journey, a silent companion casting silver light across rocky terrain. When Damien finally downshifted, Elena realized they'd reached a cliff overlooking a vast valley that seemed to stretch into infinity. The motorcycle's engine died, leaving behind a profound silence broken only by the distant whisper of wind through pine trees. Damien dismounted with a fluid grace, then turned and lifted her from the bike as if she weighed nothing. His touch was simultaneously rough and careful, a contradiction that seemed to define him perfectly. "Some people think fate is this immovable thing," he said, gazing out over the valley. "That it's predetermined, that you have no choice. I call bullshit." His profile was sharp against the moonlight, all hard angles and rebellious energy. Elena found herself transfixed. "My entire life, people have tried to tell me what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to be. But choice is everything." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing in a gesture that was both casual and electrifying. The moment stretched between them, charged, potential filled. She could feel his breath, see the pulse jumping in his throat. They were close. So close. Just as something might have happened, a distant sound cut through the night. A wolf's howl. Miles away. Crisp. Clear. Elena heard it with impossible clarity. The following week unfolded like a delicate dance of supernatural dynamics, each alpha revealing a different facet of protection and connection that drew Elena deeper into their world. Marcus's training sessions were brutal and precise. The Northern Alpha approached her self-defense lessons with the same strategic intensity he might apply to battle planning. Her body, once soft and unaware, began to transform. Muscles she didn't know existed emerged, responding to his calculated instructions. "Protect your center," Marcus would growl, demonstrating a defensive stance that seemed to combine martial arts with something more primal. His hands would guide her movements, rough yet careful, each touch sending electric pulses through her developing wolf senses. Their sparring became a language of its own. Where he was all hard angles and disciplined power, Elena discovered a raw, instinctive strength bubbling beneath her human surface. By the end of each session, she could block strikes that would have hospitalized her just days earlier. Her reflexes sharpened, her body moving with a grace that surprised even Marcus. Sebastian's approach contrasted sharply with Marcus's physical training. In the lodge's secluded meditation garden, he taught her to feel the energy that flowed not just through her body, but through the world around her. Moonflowers bloomed at her touch, responding to the awakening power within her. "Breathe," he would murmur, his voice as smooth as silk, as deep as ancient forests. "Feel the connection between your inner self and the natural world." His lessons transcended physical training. He showed her how to quiet her mind, to listen to the whispers of her emerging wolf spirit. Sometimes they would sit for hours, hands touching soil, energy flowing between them in a connection that defied words. Sebastian's spiritual wisdom created a safe space where her transformation felt less terrifying and more like a beautiful awakening. Damien's approach was nothing like the others. Where Marcus was strategic and Sebastian contemplative, Damien was pure, unbridled energy. "Forget what they're teaching you," he'd say with a wild grin. "Let your instincts guide you." His lessons were about freedom, midnight motorcycle rides, cliffside training where he'd challenge her to trust her emerging abilities. He pushed her beyond comfort, showing her that her wolf wasn't something to fear, but to embrace. "Your power isn't about control," Damien would explain during their wild adventures. "It's about understanding the raw energy inside you." Each alpha brought something different. Marcus's discipline, Sebastian's spiritual connection, Damien's wild freedom. And with each interaction, the mate bonds grew stronger, a complex web of emotion that both thrilled and terrified her. She found herself falling in love, not with one, but with all three. Marcus's protective strength, Sebastian's deep wisdom, Damien's rebellious spirit, Each connection was unique, powerful, consuming. The bonds began to intertwine, creating a connection more complex than she could have imagined. Her body changed. Her senses expanded. The world became a symphony of sensations she was only beginning to understand. And with each passing day, the choice she would eventually have to make loomed larger. A choice that would bind her to two, and condemn one to a fate worse than death. The morning felt different. Elena could sense it in the crisp mountain air, in the way the three alphas moved around her with a newfound sense of camaraderie. What had begun as fierce territorial competition had slowly transformed into something resembling brotherhood. Breakfast at Moonstone Lodge had become their ritual. Marcus would meticulously arrange silverware with military precision, while Sebastian brewed tea with leaves from his personal collection. Damien would crash into the dining room, bringing a whirlwind of wild energy that somehow complemented the other's structured approach. "More eggs," Damien would challenge Marcus, his plate piled high. Marcus would raise an eyebrow. "Some of us believe in balanced nutrition." Sebastian would chuckle, a rare sound that brought warmth to the room. "Competitive as always." Elena watched, fascinated by their dynamic. The tension that had once threatened to tear them apart now felt like an elaborate dance. They challenged each other, pushed each other's limits, but beneath it all, there was a deep respect. The peace was fragile but beautiful, until everything shattered. The first howl came just after noon. It wasn't a normal wolf's call. This was something darker, more primal. Elena felt it before anyone else, a vibration that ran through her bones, making her wolf instincts surge. Marcus was first on his feet, his body already shifting partially. "Rogues," he growled, the word a warning and a threat. Sebastian's eyes flickered with electrical energy, the air around him crackling. Damien was already moving, grabbing weapons that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The attack came fast. Too fast. Dozens of rogue wolves burst from the forest surrounding the town, their eyes wild, their bodies twisted with a madness that spoke of something deeper than simple aggression. These weren't just wild wolves. They were broken, corrupted creatures driven by a hunger beyond understanding. The town erupted into chaos. Humans ran, screaming. Buildings caught fire. The rogues moved with a coordinated brutality that suggested something more sinister than a random attack. The three alphas moved with unprecedented coordination. Marcus took the western approach, his tactical mind creating defensive formations. Sebastian controlled the wind, creating barriers that slowed the rogues' advance. Damien was pure combat energy, a whirlwind of violence that cut through the attacking wolves. And Elena, she didn't hesitate. Her body moved on instinct. Partially transformed, she fought alongside them. Her movements were raw, untrained, but filled with a power that surprised even the alphas. Where she touched, rogues fell. Her emerging abilities manifested as pure protective energy. In the middle of the battle's chaos, she saw them. Children. A group of young kids trapped in a burning building, terrified and cornered by three massive rogue wolves. Something inside Elena broke open. Her eyes, which had always been a deep brown, suddenly blazed with a silver so bright it seemed to cut through the smoke and battle. And then she released a sound no one expected. A Luna's howl. It wasn't just a sound. It was a command. A pure, primal force of energy that carried her will across the entire battlefield. Every single wolf within a mile radius froze. The rogues stopped mid-attack. The defending wolves paused. Even the alphas, Marcus, Sebastian, and Damien, found themselves momentarily stunned by the pure power of her call. Silence descended. The children were safe. The town, though damaged, had survived. And Elena stood at the center of it all. her eyes still that impossible silver, her body halfway between human and wolf. The battle was over, but something much larger was just beginning. The aftermath of the battle left Moonstone Lodge tense and wary. Elena could feel the electricity of anticipation crackling through the air, the supernatural silence from her Luna's howl still resonating in everyone's bones. As evening descended, black SUVs with diplomatic plates began arriving. Elena watched from the penthouse window, her new supernatural senses allowing her to detect the subtle shifts in energy. Something was different about these arrivals, more calculated, more dangerous. The first to enter was a woman who moved with such regal precision that even the alphas seemed to pause. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp and calculating. Elena recognized her immediately from Sebastian's descriptions. The Eastern Forest's oracle, his grandmother. The room grew cold as the oracle entered. Marcus stood at rigid attention, Damien's muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike, and Sebastian's usually calm demeanor shifted to something more guarded. "Grandmother," Sebastian said, his voice carefully controlled. The oracle's gaze swept the room, landing finally on Elena with a look of pure contempt. "So?" she said, her voice cutting like ice. "This is the one who has thrown our entire world into chaos." Marcus stepped forward, a protective growl rumbling in his chest. "You will speak to her with respect." The oracle laughed, a sound devoid of any real humor. Respect? For a human who doesn't understand the magnitude of what she's been thrust into? Elena felt the weight of supernatural tension pressing against her skin. The alphas formed an unconscious protective circle around her, their previous rivalries forgotten in the face of this new threat. "The Continental Council has been watching," the oracle continued, "and what they've seen is not promising." Sebastian's hands clenched at his sides. "Grandmother, please." "Silence," she cut him off. "You will hear what must be said." The room seemed to darken, shadows lengthening as the oracle began to speak. Her words were carefully chosen, each syllable designed to create maximum impact. She revealed the terrible truth about the triple moonmate's deadline. 2 weeks. Just 14 days to make an impossible choice that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of entire wolf territories. If no selection was made, all 3 alphas would die in a magical backlash, so powerful it would trigger generations of conflict. But it was her next revelation that truly shook the room. 1,000 years ago, she said, her eyes locked on Elena. The first triple moon mate attempted to keep all 3 bonds. The magical explosion created the Deadlands, a supernatural wasteland where nothing grows, no wolf can enter, and death is the only permanent resident. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun slightly, the weight of impossible choice crushing her. The oracle's malicious smile suggested she knew exactly the psychological damage her words were inflicting. This wasn't just information. This was a weapon designed to break their spirit. Unable to bear the intensity of the moment, Elena fled to her room. Behind her, she heard the 3 alphas begin to argue, each offering to sacrifice himself for his brothers. Their nobility made her choice feel even more impossible. The ancient archives of Moonstone Lodge stretched out like a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. Rows of leather-bound books, fragile manuscripts, and scrolls wound through massive oak shelves that seemed to breathe with centuries of supernatural history. Elena's fingers traced delicate edges of documents, her determination burning brighter than the soft candlelight that illuminated their workspace. Marcus moved with calculated precision, his large hands carefully turning pages, his eyes scanning each line with the same intensity he would use studying battle plans. The stern alpha had transformed from a warrior to a research partner, his tactical mind dissecting every potential clue about the triple moon prophecy. "Here," Elena would whisper occasionally, pointing to a fragment of text. Marcus would lean close, his body radiating a protective heat that seemed to push back the chill of the archives. Their research was more than an academic exercise. With each passing hour, the stakes grew more personal. Marcus spoke sparingly but meaningfully about his younger sister, revealing a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his usually controlled exterior. "If I don't survive," he said one afternoon, his voice low and rough, "she'll be alone." Elena understood immediately. This wasn't just about 3 alphas and a prophecy. This was about family, about protection, about the deep bonds that supernatural warriors held sacred. Their investigation became a delicate dance of academic pursuit and emotional revelation. Marcus would share snippets of pack history, his deep voice turning academic details into living stories. Elena would listen, her respect for him growing with each shared moment. Late one night, as midnight approached and candles flickered around stacks of ancient texts, something changed. The musty smell of old paper mixed with Marcus's cedar and mountain wind scent, creating an atmosphere of intimate concentration. Elena's fingers brushed against a damaged journal, its leather cover cracked and faded. As she carefully opened it, a loose page fluttered to the ground. Marcus retrieved it instantly, his movements swift and protective. The page mentioned a name: Celine. The first words were fragmentary, but clear enough to catch Elena's breath. References to a transformation beyond the ancient ways stood out, mysterious and tantalizing. "This could be important," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and exhaustion. Marcus studied the page, his eyebrows drawn together in concentration. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression, a softness that rarely emerged through his disciplined warrior facade. The moment stretched between them, charged with an understanding that went beyond words. Marcus pulled her into an embrace, his arms strong and safe. Elena felt the weight of her fears dissolve against his chest, surrounded by the scent of protection and possibility. Her tears came then, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming complexity of their shared journey. Marcus held her, his usually controlled scent wrapping around her like a promise of safety. The soft morning light filtered through the greenhouse's glass panels, casting a gentle emerald glow across the rows of moonflowers. Sebastian found Elena kneeling among the delicate plants, her hands trembling as she carefully pressed seeds into rich, dark soil. The rhythmic motions seemed both mechanical and desperate. A woman trying to control something, anything in a world spinning beyond her comprehension. "You're planting at dawn," Sebastian observed, his voice soft and spiritual. It wasn't a question, but an acknowledgement. Elena's hands stilled. Dirt smudged her cheek, matching the exhaustion in her eyes. "I needed to do something that makes sense." Sebastian knelt beside her, his movements fluid and purposeful. Instead of pushing her to discuss the night's discoveries, he simply selected a moonflower seed and began planting alongside her. The comfortable silence spoke volumes, a werewolf's understanding that healing often happens in shared action, not constant conversation. "My grandmother's anger," he finally said, breaking the quiet. "It's not just about the prophecy. It's about loss." Elena's hands paused. She looked up, meeting Sebastian's deep, knowing eyes. "The last territorial war," Sebastian continued, "took her mate. Not in battle, but in the aftermath. Slow grief, watching him fade from wounds that never fully healed. His fingers brushed against a moonflower seedling, and it seemed to lean into his touch. She sees the prophecy as another potential source of destruction. To her, change means pain. The greenhouse felt charged with unspoken emotions. Moonflowers, magical, sensitive plants that bloomed only under werewolf energy, seemed to pulse around them, sensing the spiritual connection forming. "I want to understand," Elena whispered. "Not just the prophecy, but how all of this works." Sebastian's smile was gentle. "Then we'll meditate, and I'll show you." His instructions were precise, yet compassionate. They cleared a small space among the plants, Sebastian creating a circle of calm energy that seemed to push back the greenhouse's boundaries. When they sat, cross-legged, Elena felt something fundamental shift, as if the world's normal rules were temporarily suspended. "Close your eyes," Sebastian instructed. "But don't just close them. Release your human perception. Feel beyond your physical self." His voice became a conduit, guiding her consciousness. She felt her heartbeat synchronize with something larger, the rhythm of the plants around her, the pulse of the earth beneath, the distant call of the moon's ancient magic. Werewolf consciousness, she was learning, wasn't just about transformation. It was a complex network of energy, connection, and primordial understanding. Sebastian was deliberately opening his soul, letting her experience this interconnectedness through their emerging bond. Images flooded her mind. Not memories, exactly, but possibilities. She saw the 3 wolf packs, northern mountains, eastern forests, western valleys, no longer divided by territorial lines. Instead, they moved in harmonious coordination, sharing resources, protecting each other's borders, their differences becoming strengths rather than weapons. The vision was breathtaking in its potential. Generations of wolves working together, ancient conflicts dissolved, a society that valued collective growth over individual dominance. But as quickly as the vision arrived, it fractured. Current pack laws, deeply entrenched territorial traditions, the very system that had governed werewolf society for centuries. These were immovable barriers. The harmony she'd glimpsed felt simultaneously perfect and impossible. The remaining 10 days stretched before Elena like a razor's edge, sharp, dangerous, and potentially fatal. With each passing moment, the weight of the prophecy pressed closer, a countdown to a decision that would either unite or destroy 3 powerful wolf packs. Damien approached the impending deadline with his characteristic defiance of fate. "We're not counting down to death," he announced one morning, tossing her a set of specialized climbing gear. His eyes blazed with a wild, infectious energy that made her heart race. "We're living every single moment like it's our last." His approach was fundamentally different from Marcus's methodical research or Sebastian's spiritual guidance. Where they sought solutions, Damien sought experience. Pure, raw, unfiltered living that would force her wolf nature to emerge. Their first adventure began at sunrise. A treacherous cliff overlooking a misty valley became their playground. Base jumping wasn't just a sport for Damien, it was a philosophy. "Fear is just another boundary waiting to be broken," he shouted over the wind, adjusting her harness with practiced hands that were simultaneously gentle and commanding. The jump was pure adrenaline. Wind screamed past her ears. The world became a blur of green and gray, gravity a mere suggestion. Elena's human instincts screamed terror, but something deeper, something wild and primal, roared with exhilaration. Mid-fall, something extraordinary happened. Her hands began to change, fingers elongated, nails hardening into razor-sharp claws. The transformation was partial but unmistakable. Her first true wolf shift. Panic mixed with pure electric excitement. Damien, sensing her momentary terror, caught her mid-air. His wolf reflexes were lightning quick, pulling her close against his body. They tumbled through the final moments of descent, a whirlwind of muscle, motion, and emerging power. They landed hard, not with a crash, but with a controlled roll that spoke volumes about werewolf physicality. For a breathless moment, they remained tangled together, hearts racing, the morning mist swirling around them. The passion that erupted was instantaneous and overwhelming. Damien's eyes, molten gold with wolf energy, locked onto hers. No words were necessary. The mate bond flared, a connection so powerful it transcended physical touch. When their lips met, it was less a kiss and more a collision of souls. Across the territory, two other alphas suddenly went rigid. Marcus, in the lodge's training room, dropped the tactical map he'd been studying. Sebastian, meditating in the greenhouse, knocked over an entire tray of moonflowers. The mate bond's feedback loop created a supernatural ripple of desire, jealousy, and raw animal instinct. The fragile peace they'd constructed over the past weeks trembled on the edge of shattering. For Elena, the world dissolved into pure sensation. Damien's touch was fire and electricity, awakening parts of herself she never knew existed. Her partially shifted hands gripped his shoulders, claws barely restrained. The wolf inside her recognized its mate. Wild, passionate, refusing to be constrained by destiny's rules. Damien broke the kiss first, his breath ragged. "Feel that?" he whispered. "That's living. That's choice." They both knew this moment was more than just passion. It was a declaration, a challenge to the prophecy that threatened to tear them apart. The morning mist began to burn away, revealing the vast, complicated landscape of their impossible love. The training room's expansive wooden floor trembled with barely contained tension. Elena watched as Marcus, Sebastian, and Damien moved through synchronized combat formations, their movements sharp and precise. What had started as a disciplined training session to prepare her for potential threats quickly devolved into something more primal. Sweat glistened on muscled shoulders. Each alpha's wolf energy crackled just beneath their skin, a dangerous undercurrent of suppressed aggression. They had been maintaining a delicate balance, but 5 days before the new moon, that balance was about to shatter. Marcus's northern training made his movements crisp and calculated. Sebastian moved with fluid grace, each step measured and spiritual. Damien's style was pure wild energy, unpredictable and explosive. When Sebastian blocked Damien's strike with unexpected force, something inside each of them snapped. A low growl rumbled from Marcus's chest. "Control yourself," he warned Damien, his voice a dangerous rumble. Damien's laugh was pure challenge. "Or what?" The air itself seemed to thicken. Elena felt the change before it happened. A sudden electric charge that made the hair on her arms stand up. The alpha's eyes began to shift, pupils dilating, the golden silver crimson colors bleeding into their irises. "Stop," she whispered, sensing the impending explosion. They didn't hear her, didn't want to hear her. Damien struck first, a blur of muscle and fury. Marcus intercepted, their bodies colliding with a sound like thunder. Sebastian didn't attempt to stop them. Instead, he positioned himself, waiting for an opening, his own wolf demanding participation in the dominance display. Claws emerged, teeth bared. The training room's reinforced walls began to splinter under the supernatural assault. Elena realized with horrifying clarity that this was more than a fight. This was 3 alphas whose mate bonds were creating an impossible tension. Each believed he had the strongest claim. Each was willing to destroy the others to prove it. "Stop!" she screamed, but her human voice meant nothing. Something inside her shifted. A power she didn't understand began to rise. Her eyes started to glow, not one color, but 3 simultaneously. Silver, gold, crimson. The light wasn't just a color, It was pure energy that pushed against the walls, against reality itself. When she spoke next, the voice wasn't entirely her own. It was deeper, ancient, commanding. Enough! The Luna Queen's command was absolute. All three alphas, these powerful, unbreakable warriors who had ruled their territories for decades, dropped instantly to their knees. Their bodies trembled, every muscle fighting against a force more powerful than their individual wills. The power surge was overwhelming. Elena's consciousness began to fade, the energy consuming her from the inside out. As she collapsed, her last coherent thought was wondering what was happening to her. Darkness consumed her, but it wasn't empty darkness. In this space between consciousness and something else, memories that weren't her own began to flow. Visions. Fragments of a story thousands of years old. Selene. The first triple moon mate materialized in her dreamscape. A woman both ancient and timeless, her eyes holding the same triple-colored light that Elena had just manifested. Unlike the typical werewolf legends of sacrifice and limitation, Selene's story was something entirely different. She hadn't chosen between her mates. She hadn't died. She had transformed the very nature of what a mate bond could be. Through a ritual that demanded the complete surrender of her humanity, Selene had become something unprecedented. The first Luna Queen, a being powerful enough to bind multiple alphas, to reshape pack law, to exist beyond the traditional constraints of werewolf society. The visions were fragmentary but powerful, showing glimpses of a ritual performed under a triple moon, of blood and magic intertwining, of three powerful alphas bound not by submission, but by a connection more profound than any previous understanding. Selene's eyes met Elena's in this dream space, holding a promise and a challenge. Elena's eyes fluttered open, the sterile white of the medical room slowly coming into focus. Three faces immediately filled her vision. Marcus's stern concern, Sebastian's gentle worry, and Damien's barely contained protective intensity. They looked exhausted. Days of vigil had etched lines of strain into their faces, their clothing rumpled, their scents mingling with a mixture of fear and relief. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice rough. "You're awake." The room felt different. The air hummed with a new tension, a connection between them that felt fundamentally altered from their previous dynamic. No more rivalry, no more competitive posturing. Something had changed during her unconscious state. "The vision," Elena whispered, her throat dry. "Selene's memory. There's a way—" Before she could finish, the door burst open. The Eastern Oracle entered first, Sebastian's grandmother, her ancient eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. Behind her, a procession of werewolf elders filed in, their ceremonial robes creating a sea of deep blues and silvers. The Continental Pack Council had arrived. "Absolutely not," the Oracle declared before Elena could even speak. Her voice carried the weight of centuries, each word precise and cutting. "The Luna Queen ritual is forbidden and impossible." Sebastian stepped forward, a rare edge of defiance in his typically calm demeanor. "Grandmother?" "Silence," she commanded, her power rippling through the room. The council members spread out, creating a semicircle that felt more like a tribunal than a discussion. Their eyes evaluated Elena with a mixture of curiosity and calculation. Some looked afraid. Others looked hungry. The lead council elder, a weathered wolf with silver streaks in his dark hair, spoke next. "The prophecy is clear. Choose traditionally or face the consequences. The mate bonds will not be violated." Elena's hand found Marcus's, then Sebastian's, then Damien's, a gesture that made the council members shift uncomfortably. The connection between them was no longer something that could be easily categorized or controlled. "Tell me about the ritual," she demanded. The oracle's laugh was bitter. "The ritual that destroyed an entire supernatural territory? The one that created the Deadlands? That ritual?" She produced an ancient scroll, its edges crumbling, the language so old it predated modern werewolf script. As she unrolled it, the room seemed to darken, the magical energy of the document pushing against the mundane reality of the medical room. "The price of failure is absolute," the oracle explained. "Not just death, destruction. The 4 souls involved, the 3 alphas and the potential Luna, would cease to exist, completely. No afterlife, no magical reconstruction. Pure, total obliteration." The 3 alphas exchanged a look. A silent communication that spoke volumes about how much had changed between them. Damien's hand, usually so wild and unpredictable, was steady when he placed it over Elena's. "We're with you," he said simply. Marcus nodded. "Entirely." Sebastian's touch was softer, but no less committed. "Whatever comes." The council members began to murmur. The enforcement squad, massive wolves dressed in ceremonial black, began to move forward, their intention clear. They would drag Elena away if necessary, force her compliance. But something had fundamentally shifted. As the enforcement wolves approached, the 3 alphas moved, not against each other, not in competition, but in perfect synchronized protection. Marcus's northern strength created a barrier. Sebastian's spiritual energy formed a shield. Damien's wild power crackled like lightning, ready to strike. Elena stood between them, her eyes beginning to glow with that impossible triple moon light. "I will attempt the ritual," she declared. The room went absolutely silent. The lodge's grand ballroom buzzed with tension, packed with pack representatives from across the continent. Werewolves in elegant formal wear clustered in groups, their whispers creating a constant undercurrent of speculation. Marcus had meticulously planned every detail of their elaborate distraction. Sebastian stood near the central podium, his calm presence drawing attention. Deliberately, he began a complex spiritual invocation, an ancient ritual that required absolute silence from the assembled wolves. His voice rose and fell in rhythmic chants, creating a mesmerizing spell that held the entire room captive. At the opposite side of the ballroom, Damien started a calculated argument with a rival pack leader, his voice deliberately provocative. The confrontation drew the peripheral attention of the council's enforcement squad, their heads turning just enough to create the smallest window of opportunity. Elena, dressed in a midnight blue gown that highlighted her growing supernatural presence, moved with calculated grace. Marcus's tactical training showed in every step. She wasn't just walking, she was strategically navigating the room's complex social landscape. The council's warriors were everywhere. Massive wolves in human form, their eyes constantly scanning for any unusual movement. Elena could feel their predatory awareness, each one prepared to intercept any attempt at escape. Marcus caught her eye across the room. A single, almost imperceptible nod communicated volumes. They were ready. Sebastian's chant reached a crescendo. Damien's argument erupted into what seemed like a near-physical confrontation. In that moment of maximum distraction, Elena slipped through a side door, Marcus immediately creating a magical signature that suggested movement in the opposite direction. Outside, 3 motorcycles waited, each strategically positioned for a rapid departure. Sebastian had used his connection with nature to mask their magical signatures, making them temporarily invisible to tracking spells. They rode hard and fast, leaving the lodge and civilization behind. The supernatural wilderness opened before them. Ancient forests where magical barriers shifted like living things, where terrain could change with a wolf's intention. Marcus took point, his strategic mind constantly scanning for potential threats. Sebastian followed, his spiritual connection allowing him to sense magical boundaries and potential dangers. Damien brought up the rear, his wild instincts making him the perfect rear guard. Elena rode behind Marcus, her arms wrapped tightly around his muscular frame. With each mile, she could feel the transformation happening, not just in herself, but in the bonds between them. The three alphas were no longer competing, they were synchronizing. Their communication became almost telepathic. A twitch of Marcus's shoulder would signal Sebastian to check a magical barrier. A low growl from Damien would warn of potential pursuit. They moved like a single organism, their individual strengths blending into something far more powerful. By midnight, they had covered impossible distances. The motorcycles were abandoned in a dense forest clearing, their magical signatures deliberately scrambled to prevent tracking. From here, they would travel on foot, or more accurately, on wolf. Sebastian guided them through a landscape that seemed to shift and breathe. Magical barriers that would have stopped ordinary wolves simply parted for their combined energy. Ancient trees bent slightly, creating paths where none existed moments before. Marcus carried Elena across terrain that would have been impossible for a human to traverse. His strength was immense, but gentle, every movement calculated to provide maximum protection and minimum discomfort. Damien scouted ahead, his wild energy sensing dangers long before they could become threats. Rogue wolf hunting parties, magical traps, natural obstacles, nothing came close to touching them. The bonds between them pulsed with an energy that was becoming something entirely new. Not just connection, not just magical synchronization, but a true merging of spirit and intention. 48 hours until the new moon. The ritual grounds awaited. The ritual circle emerged as they crested a moonlit ridge, an ancient stone formation etched with symbols older than any living werewolf could remember. Massive granite monoliths formed a perfect circle, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer and move in the twilight. As Elena approached, her triple moon mark began to glow, a delicate, silver-blue pattern that traced along her forearm and pulsed with an inner light. The magical barriers parted like liquid silver, responding to her unique energy. Marcus stepped forward first, his protective instinct keeping him slightly ahead of the group. His hand brushed Elena's back, a subtle gesture of support that spoke volumes about his carefully controlled emotions. "The circle accepts us," Sebastian murmured, his voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. The wind around them seemed to quiet, as if the very elements were holding their breath. As darkness fell, they prepared their camp within the sacred space. Damien gathered wood with his characteristic wild efficiency, creating a fire that burned with an unnatural blue-silver flame. The circle itself seemed to breathe with them, ancient magic thrumming just beneath the surface. When the fire settled and the night wrapped around them like a living thing, Marcus was the first to speak. His voice was low, almost hesitant, a tone so different from his usual commanding presence that it immediately drew everyone's attention. "I first felt the mate pull in my dreams," he admitted, his eyes fixed on the fire. "Weeks before we met, I saw flashes. Your eyes, your strength. But they were just fragments, like broken mirror pieces." He looked up, meeting Elena's gaze. "I thought it was just another prophetic dream. The northern packs are used to such things. But this was different. This felt real." Sebastian shifted, the firelight catching the subtle sadness in his eyes. "I've seen visions of our united future since I was a child," he said softly. "My grandmother, the Oracle, she tried to suppress these visions, but they came anyway. Moments of us together, moments of peace, moments of incredible power." Damien, typically the most irreverent of the three, was uncharacteristically quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability none of them had heard before. My wild nature, he said, a sardonic smile playing at the edges of his mouth, was me trying to outrun a prophecy I thought would cage me. He threw another log onto the fire, sending sparks dancing. I didn't want to be bound, didn't want to be told who I would love, who I would be. The silence that followed was profound. Elena understood then that this moment was about more than just their physical connection. This was about their souls, how they had been shaped, wounded, and ultimately brought together by forces beyond their individual understanding. Through the mate bonds, she began to show them something deeper. She let them feel how each of them had awakened different parts of her soul. Marcus had shown her strength, the kind of resilience that could weather any storm. Sebastian had revealed wisdom, a connection to something larger than themselves. And Damien had gifted her freedom, the wild, untamed spirit that refused to be controlled. "If I lose any of you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "I'll never be whole." The bonds between them began to pulse, not with competition, but with a synchronization more powerful than any of them had ever experienced. The magical circle around them began to respond, the ancient stones humming with an energy that felt like recognition. As the new moon rose, something fundamental was shifting. As the new moon reached its zenith, a silvery light cascaded over the ritual circle. The three alphas, Marcus, Sebastian, and Damien, took their positions at the cardinal points, forming a perfect triangle around Elena. Their movements were synchronized, almost ritualistic, each step charged with ancient power. Elena stood at the center, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The visions of Selene burned in her mind, cryptic instructions, fragments of an impossible transformation. She knew what she had to do. The moment the moon reached its absolute peak, she would open herself completely to the triple mate bond. Marcus's position at the northern point radiated strength, a solid, immovable force. Sebastian's eastern stance breathed with spiritual energy, roots and wind swirling invisibly around him. Damien's western point crackled with wild, untamed power that seemed to challenge the very magic around them. As the moon reached its precise apex, Elena took a deep breath and dropped her mental shields. The mate bonds exploded into life. Pain unlike anything she had ever experienced tore through her body. It was as if three separate wolves were trying to claim her simultaneously. Marcus's wolf of solid mountain granite, Sebastian's wolf of whispering forest winds, Damien's wolf of untamed mountain fire. Each bond pulled with incredible force, threatening to rip her apart from the inside. Her human form began to shift erratically. One arm transformed into Marcus's steel-gray wolf limb, another into Sebastian's silvery white wolf appendage, while her legs threatened to become Damien's midnight black wolf limbs. The transformation was violent, uncontrolled, a magical nightmare that defied biological possibility. The alphas sensed her agony. Without hesitation, they began channeling their life force through the bonds, attempting to stabilize her fragmenting form. Their wolves emerged partially. Marcus's massive gray form, Sebastian's lean silver shape, Damien's muscular black silhouette, each overlapping, trying to support her. Their howls, a harmony of pain, determination, and primal connection, echoed through the ritual circle. Ancient stones vibrated with the sound, magical runes flickering with responsive energy. The very ground beneath them seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their combined power. Elena's human consciousness began to fade. The pain was unbearable. Each mate bond pulled with such intensity that she could feel herself being torn into three separate beings. Blood trickled from her nose, her eyes, evidence of the magical strain threatening to destroy her. The alphas continued pouring their energy into her, their own bodies trembling with the effort. They were losing her. With each passing moment, her life force grew weaker, the magical transformation threatening complete failure. Just when it seemed certain she would not survive, a moment of profound clarity broke through the pain. She didn't need to become 3 wolves. She didn't need to be divided. She needed to be something entirely new. The moment of surrender changed everything. As Elena released her human limitations, a massive energy wave erupted from the ritual circle. The ground trembled, ancient stones cracking with primal power. Her transformation was unlike anything the werewolf world had ever witnessed. Where a human woman had stood moments before, now emerged a wolf of breathtaking majesty. Her fur was impossible, a living canvas that shifted between silver, gold, and midnight black, each color flowing like liquid moonlight. The triple moon mark blazed on her forehead, a brilliant symbol of power that radiated supernatural energy. The 3 Alpha's wolves immediately dropped into deep submission. Marcus's steel-gray wolf lowered his massive head, Sebastian's silvery wolf folded his lean body, and Damien's midnight black wolf pressed his belly to the ground. Their instinctive response was pure, unquestioning recognition. But this was more than simple submission. As Elena's new form stabilized, the mate bonds transformed. No longer were they separate connections. They became a single, unified network of consciousness. She could feel Marcus's strategic thoughts, Sebastian's spiritual awareness, Damien's wild instincts. Their memories, strengths, and emotions merged with her own in a complex tapestry of shared experience. Her command over them was revolutionary. Unlike traditional alpha dominance built on fear or hierarchical structure, her leadership emerged from a profound, multi-layered love. She could guide their collective power not through force, but through an intimate understanding that transcended individual identity. The first indication of the ritual's continental impact came as a distant howl, then another and another. Werewolf packs across different territories simultaneously lifted their heads, sensing the monumental shift in supernatural dynamics. At the ritual site, the first arrivals were the Continental Pack Council's warriors. They had tracked the group, expecting to interrupt an impossible and forbidden transformation. Instead, they found a completed, irreversible event that would rewrite werewolf history. The ancient oracle, who had initially forbidden the ritual, stood frozen, her weathered face a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. The magical energy surrounding Elena was unlike anything she had witnessed in centuries. Elena turned, her tri-colored wolf form moving with impossible grace. When she looked at the council warriors, they instinctively took a collective step backward. Her gaze held not just power, but a profound understanding that seemed to look through them rather than at them. With a simple thought, she commanded her 3 mates. Marcus's strategic mind immediately analyzed their surroundings. Sebastian's spiritual awareness created a protective magical barrier, and Damien's wild energy prepared for potential conflict. Their movements were so synchronized it appeared they were a single organism with 4 distinct consciousnesses. The oracle was the first to speak, her voice rough with age and wonder. "The prophecy," she whispered. "It wasn't just about mating. It was about unification." Elena's response came not through words, but through a telepathic wave that washed over everyone present. The message was clear. The era of divided werewolf territories was over. Her demonstration of power was subtle, yet absolute. With a mere mental suggestion, she showed her ability to command the Northern Mountain, Eastern Forest, and Western Valley packs simultaneously. Territorial boundaries that had been rigidly maintained for centuries suddenly seemed arbitrary and meaningless. The council warriors exchanged glances. Their mission to stop the ritual was now laughably irrelevant. They were witnessing the birth of a new supernatural order. Political implications crashed through the supernatural world like a tsunami. Centuries of separate pack cultures, of carefully maintained boundaries and centuries-old rivalries were about to be fundamentally rewritten by this single, extraordinary being. Elena, now the second Luna Queen in history, stood at the center of this transformative moment, her three mates surrounding her in perfect, protective formation. The new age of werewolf society had begun. The full moon cast its silver light across the massive gathering, illuminating thousands of werewolves from every territory. Elena stood at the center of the grand platform, her presence commanding yet graceful. 6 months of leadership had transformed her from a hesitant human to a Luna Queen whose very presence redefined werewolf society. Her outfit was a statement of unity, a midnight blue gown that shimmered with silver threads, symbolizing the blending of her three mate bonds. To her left stood Marcus, his formal military dress uniform crisp and precise. To her right, Sebastian wore robes that seemed woven from moonlight and forest shadows. Damien, ever the wild card, had compromised with a tailored black suit that still managed to look slightly rebellious. The unification ceremony represented more than a political shift. It was a fundamental reimagining of werewolf culture. Packs that had been bitter enemies for generations now stood shoulder to shoulder, their territorial markers dissolved, their ancient rivalries transformed into a collaborative vision. Marcus's strategic mind had meticulously planned the ceremony's logistics. Sebastian's spiritual connections had blessed the gathering, creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility. Damien's diplomatic skills had smoothed over the most contentious political negotiations, proving that his wild nature could be a powerful diplomatic tool when properly channeled. Elena stepped forward, her voice carrying a power that silenced thousands instantly. Today, we are not northern mountains, eastern forests, or western valleys, she declared. Today, we are one pack, one territory, one future. The roar of approval was deafening. Werewolves who had once been sworn enemies now embraced, their previous divisions seeming as distant as an old, half-forgotten dream. Each of her mates represented a critical aspect of their new unified structure. Marcus commanded the military forces, his tactical brilliance ensuring their protection. Sebastian oversaw spiritual matters and agricultural development, connecting their people to the natural world. Damien managed external relations and commerce, his wild creativity opening new economic opportunities. As Elena spoke, her connection to her mates pulsed warmly. The mate bonds had evolved from a desperate, painful connection to a seamless network of shared consciousness. She could feel Marcus's strategic calculations, Sebastian's spiritual insights, Damien's creative energy, all flowing through her like a complex living network. The ceremony continued, with pack leaders formally swearing loyalty to the new structure. Ancient treaties were burned, new agreements signed. Each werewolf received a mark, a small tattoo that represented their place in the unified territory, but also their individual identity. When the official proceedings concluded, the celebration began. Music, dancing, feasting, a true werewolf gathering that celebrated their newfound unity. Elena moved through the crowd with her mates, each interaction a delicate dance of diplomacy and personal connection. As the night progressed, the four of them found a moment of privacy away from the main celebration. They stood together on a balcony overlooking the massive gathering, their hands intertwined. Elena looked at her mates, Marcus's steady strength, Sebastian's profound wisdom, Damien's untamed spirit. Each had transformed her, completed her in ways she never could have imagined when this journey began. "We did it," she said softly, feeling the warm pulse of their shared bond. Marcus squeezed her hand. Sebastian smiled, a rare moment of pure joy crossing his usually serious face. Damien's wild grin spoke volumes about their shared triumph. In that moment, Elena knew their journey was far from over, but they would face whatever came next. Together,